Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party Network, home to so many amazing shows, from shows like Nerd Nuptial with Tristan and the Girl. We've got Missing Frames with Sean. We're diving into the films that we should have seen by now. Aggressive Negotiations, which is up for awards. And now another show featuring me and Dallas, the A24 Project, which is started downloading onto people's phones or can be found online yesterday, where me and Dallas dive into the back catalogue of A24 movies, all the way from movies like Spring Breakers, The Bling Ring. We'll be discussing Lady Bird, Hereditary, and so many of those A24 movies you might have seen the trailer for or heard its name about, and we'll start to dive into them from kind of now onwards. So yeah, it's not going to just be, us here on Filibuster. It's going to be it's going to be us on another podcast. So it's all very exciting. So I'm glad to be doing both of them with you, Dallas.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure as always, and it's like we've actually not recorded a filibuster together for over a month, and now we're back with 4 brand new episodes of podcasts in one day. So it's crazy.
Exactly, yeah, I know it's been crazy. Anyone that sort of followed us on social media knows that I was at the London Film Festival and Dallas was at the MCM Comic Con in London, both at separate times and both enjoying geeky fun in both separate ways. But it's really good to get back behind the mic and talk with you again. I was when I released the podcast last week, where it was all the London Film Festival interviews, you think of all the time that was put into like interviews and arranging times and waiting on the red carpet to interview some of these stars, and then you put together the actual audio time and it comes into about just shy of an hour's time, and you think like so much work just for an hour worth of kind of conversations and chats. So it makes talking to you feel like it's an absolute walk in the park.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say. And there was me about to say hashtag first world problems of me seeing you all your tweets, having to get up at like 6-7 in the morning, queue for an hour and a half, 2 hours to get into a screening room to watch a film that I'm not gonna get to see until either late November or even January, February. My heart bled the whole time you were there. It was really, but I have to say, I listened to the interviews last week, and I have to say you did a great job, especially with the Outlaw King ones. It was great to hear Chris Pine on the Nerd Party, his rightful home, and talking about his Scottish accent. I'm looking forward to seeing that this weekend, actually. It's on Netflix this weekend, although you can see it on the big screen if you're in Glasgow or Edinburgh. If you live anywhere else in Scotland, you're going to have to make do with Netflix. But it looks like an exciting one, and potentially this generation's
I would say,
Braveheart.
I'm not a big fan of Braveheart, and I'm no Scottish nationalist by any stretch, but I really, really enjoyed Outlaw King, and it was one of these movies that I came out with like a huge smile on my face. Like I was lucky enough to get to see it on like a huge IMAX screen, and you're thinking like, oh my god, imagine having to watch this Scottish war epic on something like a TV. So it's really good that it is getting a bit of a rollout at not just one but kind of 2 cinemas here in Edinburgh. And obviously it's one of the movies I did see at the festival, but we'll kind of talk probably more about it next week once you've seen it, because as I say, it'll be me just talking about, oh, this was wonderful, this was great, and you can't even say anything otherwise. So we'll discuss that one probably in more detail next week.
Absolutely, along with Widows, the opening film of the London Film Festival, which is out this week as well, so I'll be able to catch that this weekend. But what can you tell us about the London Film Festival?
Yeah.
What if you were to pick, say, 5 films which you saw, which are either coming out now or maybe you'd like to recommend, not the ones which have already got the big releases, which are the ones which you should say people should sort of try and hunt down and find any which way they can.
Yeah, and there was so many films. I think I saw about 30 in the end, and one of the things I came away with, and I remembered your bit of advice, was about, I think there's a Twitter feed dedicated to retweeting and sharing film critics or press and industry people that go to these events and sort of their many first world problems at these events. And I have never seen a film festival with so much moaning and subtweeting about, look at all these people in queues already, don't they know, or just so much things like that of like, well, these people are getting into this screening, these people aren't getting into that, and like, why can these people go see that? And I was like, oh my god, I've never seen such a weird environment as the film festival. But aside from that, I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I mean, it really is quite a tiring experience, and I know we were talking about it earlier where you start pretty much like bang on 8 o'clock in the morning, but you sort of end up queuing to get in to see some of these films, and you watch films till about 5 o'clock, and then if say like us, we covered quite a few red carpets, so you're kind of having a late night, and by the time you get back to your Airbnb, it becomes a kind of a long day. So some of these films, you're always looking for something to just put a rocket up your arse, something that gets you really woken up, getting excited, because you're watching a lot of films, some great, some bad, and there's films certainly that are going to be coming out, like Happy New Year, Colin Burstead, which me and you would be seeing, as soon as we possibly could, new Coen Brothers movies, so many things that were at the festival that were big hits. But for me, the first film I saw at the festival that I was totally blown away with was Thunder Road by Jim Cummings, which was on the first day. So there's been kind of a bit of buzz going about this film. It's Jim Cummings had created like a short feature all about him at a funeral of his mother, where he was trying to put together, getting a little speaker to play this music, and he was going to have a little song and dance to his old mother, kind of paying tribute to her. And this film kind of expands on that short, so that kind of makes up the first few minutes. And what we find out with this movie, Thunder Road, is Jim Cummings is going to be a real breakout star. This is going to be the kind of film that not many people see, but the people that do see it are going to love it. And the people that will probably be seeing this film, perhaps industry people, we'll look at like someone like Jim Cummings, who wrote, directed, produced and starred in this movie, as someone that they really probably want to take a chance on. So we follow Jimmy, his character, who's going through a divorce, he's going to be losing custody of his child, and he's just dealing with the kind of the grief of losing his mother and sort of being on his own. And the film really threads tragedy and comedy incredibly well, which is hard to do, that you're laughing one minute, pitying the next, and feeling kind of sorrow for this character the next. And it was really one of these films that you see people sometimes queuing up a bit early to see a film. They don't want to miss it. And this was one of those ones where people were just excited. They really wanted to see this film. It was a packed screening in the afternoon, and I think it was one of these movies that people are just really connecting with. They're laughing, they're having a good time with, and they're coming out of it really impressed. And I've seen a lot of movies come out really well reviewed, but I think Thunder Road is one that I think is going to be a real cult hit and a real word of mouth. Something like Widows, yeah, we're all going to be able to see in the big screen, but Thunder Road, it's available now in iTunes in America, so it's definitely one to keep an eye out for, and one I highly recommend.
Excellent. Well, no, it's definitely it's one that again I hadn't heard of, but I mean again, it's always the way. I mean, with these festivals, you get the big gala screenings and the big hitters, but it's trying to find the gems in the sort of in the rough. And yeah, you're sort of scrolling through probably an 80-page brochure trying to find what you'd like to see, and then of course then there's a problem of what you can actually see given what times the screenings are, because they'll only have probably like 2 public screenings, 1 press screening each, of course, over the course of the festival. So it's trying to create intricate spreadsheets of where they are, and then of course you've then got to figure out which cinema they're in, and can you get to this cinema and this screen by the time one finishes and stuff like that. So it's sometimes a mathematical nightmare in order to try and fit everything in, but I guess it's all about prioritizing the ones that you really want to see and then finding some gems along the way, I guess.
Yeah, and sometimes you fall into a film by complete accident. There was one film that I think everyone remembers when sort of Toronto Film Festival came along, that there was talk of, there was the year of the female singer. So you had films like A Star Is Born, we had something like Vox Lux, you have quite a few other movies, and one of the movies that kind of came out of kind of Toronto with a bit of buzz, and it was a film that I must admit I was feeling a bit cynical about. I wasn't too interested going in. It was just at a convenient time that if I saw this movie I'd be able to go and see something I really wanted to, and have a pretty good guarantee of getting to see a ticket to see a screening. And I went along to see Wild Rose. So it stars Jessie Buckley, who continues her really good year after starring in Beast. And she absolutely nails a Glaswegian accent as a recently released single mother from prison who has dreams of going to Nashville to be a country western singer, and balancing that and being a single mother and kind of getting her freedom back after being in prison. Now, it's a movie that people will have kind of seen all before, perhaps in some of the way it deals with it, but it was one of these most incredibly charming films that you're seeing sort of a Glaswegian that's very much relatable to probably someone we've maybe met before or crossed paths with, that has a dream. And in Scotland, we're always about, you shouldn't have ideas above your station and such like. But this film is all about someone going for that dream, and it does cause a bit of damage along the way to her family and her prospects of her career, but she's someone that's determined to do it. And you go along with the character, you judge her when she makes the wrong choices about getting there, and you champion her when things sort of come together for her. And the music is really good. I'm not a country western fan by any stretch of the imagination, but this is one of these movies that is a great showcase of Glasgow, of Scottish talent as well. It's got Julie Walters appearing in it as well, Jessie Buckley, not Scottish, but you'd never know it from this. And it's just one of these movies you come away going, that was absolutely lovely. I had a wee cry myself, towards the end. Maybe it was sort of that kind of point of the festival and I was tired, but I certainly felt a wee kind of tinge of tears in my eye. And I highly recommend Wild Rose. I think it's going to be one of these Scottish films that is certainly going to make a splash when it arrives eventually in kind of cinemas.
The way you're describing it's similar to, I think, probably your reaction of when you came out of Hearts Beat Loud. So is this the Glaswegian Hearts Beat Loud?
Yeah, it is to an extent, absolutely. It's it's really interesting, and as I say, it's one of these ones. It's nothing. It's not shooting for any sort of wow, this is something completely original. It's just a well acted, lovely story. A lot of the tropes we've seen all before, but the strength of Jessie Buckley's performance, Julie Walters is brilliant as sort of the stern mother trying to see sense into her child about kind of looking after her family and putting her family first, is really good. And it's just one of these movies. I think it's just a really lovely film. It does something well, and it's great to see something like Glasgow getting a bit of representation in a story that's not about drugs or crime or mobsters. It's just about someone that dares to dream, and it's one of these movies that you're just really happy got the funding and will probably get an audience. It really surprised a lot of people that went to see this film. I certainly rank it better than Hearts Beat Loud. Not Hearts Beat Loud. The Star Is Born. Personally, it's definitely worth seeking out.
Whoa, those are big words.
Yeah,
big words, because I saw A Star Is Born and I absolutely loved it, even though I thought I wasn't going to. But that is high praise indeed, and I can imagine that it sounds like it's a film which will probably end up playing for about 6 months in the Glasgow Film Theatre.
It most probably definitely is, and I think Jessie Buckley is I think she's gone from strength to strength this year, and you think of this and Beast, and it's just such a breakout year for her. And I think I'm really excited for people here in Scotland to see Wild Rose and see what their kind of reaction to it is. It's genuinely one of those nice surprises where you come out and you text people in a group chat or some of your friends that are also at the festival and go, hey, I've just seen this film, try and catch it if you can. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it was Matthew Turner, who we know, a film fan, 1978 on Twitter, and he was raving about this as well, saying it was probably the best performance he'd seen all year. I don't think American audiences probably know her very much, although she was in Taboo, the Tom Hardy series, and what I didn't realise until actually I started Googling after I'd heard all this buzz about her is that she was actually one of the original people on the TV reality show To Find a Nancy for Oliver. She was actually a reality show contestant. She was actually did like stage and stuff like that. So I didn't really realise this until after I sort of read up about her. So it's great to see her sort of making this breakthrough, because she was fantastic in Beast as well, and it's another one of those films which hopefully will find a spot on a few people's sort of best of of the year and sort of maybe allow people to reappraise it and sort of seek it out.
Stars the famous guy from the Cineworld adverts as well, so it's he's gone on to do those, and she's gone on to star in something like Wild Rose.
Yeah, it's just I've noticed recently. I went to Cineworld to watch Bohemian Rhapsody this weekend. They've actually shortened the Cineworld ad that it normally plays just before the film. It was normally about sort of 2 minutes long. It's now sort of been cut down to about 30 seconds. So it's clear that people are kind of fed up with that particular advert already. So
my girlfriend hates
I'm not
him.
Sure what I'm not sure what the future holds for Johnny Flynn, but it might not be advertising Cineworld for much longer.
No. For me, another film that I kind of saw at the festival, which, again, about a female singer, which seems to be a bit of a recurring trend this year, is Vox Lux. And I don't want to go into this movie kind of too much. I know the trailer has arrived sort of in the past week or so, and it certainly teases the film well. I think people could be mistaken for watching that film and thinking, oh, that's that entire film. I can sort of see where that's going to go. What I would say is that trailer keeps a lot of its cards up its sleeves, and I would say Vox Lux is without a doubt my favourite film of the year. And it was a sort of a very late entry to the London Film Festival, and it was a late addition into sort of the press and industry screening. So it was showing in a screen with about 130 seats. So I skipped the first film of the day, which was, I think, Frontrunner, the big blockbuster of the day, to go queue up about 2 hours early with a bunch of other people to guarantee a spot to see this film. And it certainly delivered. I was very excited for it, and it certainly didn't disappoint. I mean, I went in as blind as I possibly could. I just love Natalie Portman. I think Stacey Martin's a very underrated actor. Brady Corbett's first movie, sort of A Childhood of a Leader, I think is a very underrated film as well. So I was really excited for this one. And all I'll say about it is that it is the genesis of a pop star in a very dark and cynical way, and it is one of the toughest films to watch of the year. I think I remembered speaking with someone, and their advice before going into the film, I think they'd maybe heard some of the more of the Toronto buzz, was if you can survive the first 15 minutes, you are in for an incredible film treat. And that's all I'll say is, if you see this movie and you can keep it as well hidden as possible, you're going to be surprised and wowed by one of these movies. And I think it'll be frustrating that this film will start to roll out in America quite soon, and then for the rest of us perhaps in the UK that haven't seen it, they're going to start to hear different things from critics and think pieces and reviews comparing this to A Star Is Born and other different movies, and things will kind of come out of it. I think if you can go into this movie blind, you will get the experience that perhaps I had, and you might rank it as the best film of the year that you've seen. Perhaps not. Some people have come out of it with the most opposite opinion, thinking it's terrible. For me, I think it's without a doubt one of the best.
Excellent. It's coming out in the States on the 7th of December, but there's no confirmed UK release date. So when it gets to the end of the year and we do our top 10 of the year, will I let you include that one if it doesn't have a UK release date? We'll cross that bridge.
Yes, I've got thoughts on that.
Yeah, we'll cross that bridge. But it's definitely one of my most anticipated films of the year, or next year, depending when they eventually release it. It looks like it'll probably come out early next year over here in the UK. But yeah, no, I'm a sucker for Natalie Portman, so that was all I needed to see it. And I've seen glimpses of the trailer, but again, I don't know too much, so I'm going to try and go in as cold as possible and hopefully be rewarded.
Absolutely. So another kind of hidden gem of the festival, I'm trying to avoid all the gala movies, so if you think, why hasn't he picked something like the Favourite, for example, or along those lines, we all know, and those films will get plenty of attention and a coverage, the Beale Streets Could Talks, etc. But it's all just now perhaps about picking these smaller films, and one of the ones where I was lucky to get a ticket to the public screening on the first official day of the festival, where it was called Asako 1 and 2, which is about it's a Japanese movie, and it's about a young girl called Asako who meets her ex-boyfriend's perfect double 2 years after his mysterious disappearance. And it's such a kind of funny, weird movie where I've managed to see quite a lot of Asian films, films from Japan, China, South Korea, And this was one that really kind of made me chuckle. It follows this romantic relationship, and it was really good to see, I say a healthy relationship portrayed from kind of Japan, but it was certainly a different one. But we don't really kind of get movies like that with relationships that we've seen in some of the kind of movies that have broken out over the past few years. We've seen things like The Handmaiden, Old Boy, where its portrayal of romance and love is perhaps more on the twisted and dark side. This is just something that's a bit different, a bit funny. It's very much in that sort of kind of mumblecore style generation, and I really enjoyed it. And it's got plenty of humor in it. It's got a fantastic performance from the lead actress who plays Asako. So I would highly recommend, if you ever get the chance to see this movie, if it ever kind of comes near anyone's cinema, to check it out. It was a real charmer.
Yeah, no, that one sounds interesting, because I'd heard some buzz about another, I think it was a Chinese film, Long Day's Journey into Night. Did you catch that one?
No, I didn't know.
No, I was hearing a lot of good things about it, because apparently it's a 3D movie, but it starts with a disclaimer saying this is not a 3D movie.
Yes.
And then it turns into like this one take sort of trip as a mystery unfolds in China, and apparently it's got like one of the most sweat-inducing endings, in the fact that they're doing this one single take, and there's something that happens at the end that, if it goes wrong, basically the entire thing is ruined, and they would have had to have gone back and tried to do it again. So there was so much pressure on someone to be able to do something. I don't know what it is, but the way people talked about it, it was another one of these sort of hidden gems that hopefully that's something that will eventually get a release and we'll be able to see it as well. But again, like you say, a lot of these films, they come into these festivals without distribution deals. I guess the main idea is to get people to talk about them, to get people interested in them. Hopefully they will get picked up, but I guess it's the luck of the draw sometimes. But I know one that has got picked up finally, that there was a lot of buzz about, and it was another late entry into the festival, and that was Sorry to Bother You.
Oh god, yeah, I wanted to talk about that, but I considered that a big film. But yeah, Sorry to Bother You was wonderful.
Excellent, because I think it is getting a very small release in a couple of weeks in the UK, but it's one that was out a couple of months ago and people were raving about it, and even the director was sort of on Twitter trying to implore people to make noise about it in order to get a UK distributor. But thankfully that is coming, and again, it's one I think that's got a few twists and tales that you want to try and avoid, and so it's good that we're finally getting a chance to see it in the UK cinemas without, even though it has been out for a few months, I've managed to be unspoilt, so hopefully that'll be able to continue for at least a couple more weeks until I get the chance to finally see it.
Absolutely, I'm saying nothing about this movie. Again, I was the same as you. I was in complete a bubble, trying to avoid anything about this film, and Sorry to Bother You absolutely kills with an audience. So if you have to travel to see this film, I 100% recommend it. It is one of the funniest, surrealist, like what the fuck kind of movies you will see this year, and I'm really excited for people to see it and to see it with an audience, because I thought it was absolutely one of the highlights of the festival, and one that me and a few friends that have still seen it are still making kind of jokes and references to. And even in my work today, someone was talking about a call center, and I'm sitting in the back of my mind going, I can't make a Sorry to Bother You joke. I can't make a Sorry to Bother You joke, and just sitting on it because no one else is going to get it but me at that point in the office. So yeah, I can't wait for this to get a UK release. I'm so excited for it.
Yeah, and I guess speaking of what the fuck type of films, I guess it could segue nicely into discussing Mandy, which was, I think it screened at the festival but also had a small cinema release and is now available on DVD and Blu-ray over here in the UK. I think it's already out in America, but that is an interesting watch, and for me, it was probably Nick Cage's best film in a long time. And I think you saw this one and maybe weren't as keen on it as I was, but what did you think of Mandy?
I had quite a challenge to watch this movie. So I originally booked my ticket in advance to see it at the Prince Charles Cinema. So I think I spent like £13 to see it on like a Monday night. So I was like, yeah, perfect. I'm really looking forward to this film. And then I got the opportunity to do the red carpet for a film, and I can't remember which one it was, but I was like, ooh, I've got to do that. It's too good an opportunity. So I went to the Prince Charles Cinema. I was like, hey, I've got a ticket for the Monday night screening. Can I exchange it for this Wednesday evening screening? And they were like, yeah, you'll take a bit of a loss on it because this screening is a cheaper one that you'll be going to. I was like, that's fine. So it got to the Wednesday when I was going to see Mandy for my second attempt. And then I got an email saying, hey, you've been accredited for, I think it was Outlaw King. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to go back to that cinema, trade in my ticket again for another screening. And I was too embarrassed to go do that. So I looked at the Thursday, my last day that I was at the London Film Festival before coming back, and I was like, right, I can get a ticket for £5 for the first showing of the day at like 1 o'clock. There's not a film festival film I want to see at that time. I will go see Mandy at that point. So I didn't want to go back to the cinema and embarrass myself, so I got the ticket and I went to see it. And I was really, really tired by this point of the festival. And I was really struggling to stay awake during the film. As you kind of know, it's so hypnotic. And I was just sitting there in this seat of the Prince Charles, just dazing in and out of kind of reality, missing little bits here and there. And it was like, oh my God, what is going on? It was a surreal experience, to say the least. And I feel that I definitely need to see it again to see it in sort of better circumstances.
I think I know exactly which bit you mean. It's when Andrea Riseborough's character, the proverbial Mandy, has been kidnapped by this cult. This is basically the plot of the movie, so I'm not really spoiling anything here. Nick Cage and Andrea Riseborough are together, and one day a cult sort of drive by, see Andrea Riseborough, and decide, ooh, she's nice, we're going to want to induct her into the cult, so she sort of gets kidnapped. And there's this whole scene where this sort of Charles Manson-esque crazy cult leaders basically drugged her up to the eyeballs and is talking to her, and the camera movement is just so sort of surreal and sort of fades in and out. There's multiple images on the screen stuff, so I can imagine that as he's basically trying to get inside her head, he's probably doing that to you as well, and the fact that you're completely sort of wiped and totally tired, and sort of it just sort of washes over you. And it's such an odd film, but I just loved it. It's kind of like a gritty, dirty version of what Nicholas Winding Refn would do with these kind of films. And some people might always go on about how Nicolas Cage is over the top. He's over the top. He's just rage Cage and stuff like this. He isn't always. He can dial it down occasionally. There was Joe recently, a few years ago, where he did a nice understated performance. Adaptation is a great one, but there is always the risk that he will fly off the handle and will go into sort of face-off sort of territory and stuff like that. But for the most part of the film, he actually kind of plays it straight, and it's only in the sort of second half of the film when he's wanting to get Mandy back that the real Nicolas Cage comes out, and he designs this massive axe and basically goes on this bloodlust, carnage-fueled wild ride, and it's just such a bizarre but a wonderful sort of film. It sort of gave me the sort of same sort of what the fuck sort of ideas as when I watched Kill List for the first time. It had sort of elements of that sort of thing, but I just thought it was wonderful, and it's one of my favourites of the year. But it's not a film for everyone. It's certainly probably not a Thursday afternoon at 1 o'clock type of film. It's more of a late night type of film. But for me, it was one of the best I've seen in a while.
I think one thing that I really did like about it, kind of seeing it at that sort of time of the day, was that it was sort of a smaller crowd. And I think there's a scene where, there's no spoilers to say, where he goes into a bathroom and it's like a one cut where kind of Nicolas Cage's character is having this meltdown and sort of smashing apart this sort of, just this bathroom. And I can imagine perhaps with like a packed out audience, some people more looking at sort of the ironic side of these things would kind of start laughing at it, treating it like it's sort of The Room or something like that, whereas it is a man just in horror and distress. And it was it was certainly a good movie, but I just wasn't in the right frame of mind to enjoy it, sadly.
Yeah, no, I think I've heard about sort of people have mentioned that particular scene, and yeah, my audience that I saw it on, I think, an early evening at the local independent cinema, and everyone was sort of went with the character, whereas I think if it was in a multiplex or something, I think people have been laughing at that particular scene and not taking it the way it was intended and stuff. So, I mean, that's with Nicolas Cage. You could always go either way any second, and I think it depends what the audience is like for it. But it's certainly one that is definitely worth a watch if you like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's okay. So, and I think another kind of sort of one of the kind of big movies, Mandy, some of the smaller one, kind of one of the big movies that have kind of come out while we've both been away has been First Man. I'm really curious to hear your take on it. I've not really had a chance to kind of talk about it with anyone yet.
No, it's one that I was really, really looking forward to. I mean, I've loved Whiplash, loved La La Land, really like Ryan Gosling. I think he's a very underrated actor. I think he can do a lot by not saying much. He's one of those great actors who's very stoic, and it works certainly with the character of Neil Armstrong, who is very sort of insular, just wants to get on with the job, doesn't have time for the press and the pomp of this sort of, we're going to be the first men to land on the moon, as opposed to Buzz Aldrin. And well, certainly in First Man, the version of Buzz Aldrin comes across as a total dick, and I don't know why that is in this particular film, but for me, I was left a bit cold by it. I don't know why, because it's a perfectly functional film. It shows the journey of Neil Armstrong to joining NASA, leading up to the moment where they stand on the moon. And I know there's all this controversy, certainly over in the UK, about the IMAX version of First Man, where they're not getting the full immersive screen experience which you should be getting with it, due to the fact that it's not on 70mm or anything like that. But I came away sort of feeling not as emotionally connected as I should have, and I'm not sure if that was just simply because of the character of Neil Armstrong and the fact that he's not really that way. But this was, a huge achievement. I was sitting there watching it going, it is crazy what these people managed to do with, I think it's basically what someone said, with less computing technology than we have in an iPhone. They managed to get these men to the moon and stuff like that. And it's like, you need people like that these days working on stuff to make the world better, but we don't. But it just left me, there was just something missing, and I don't know what it was, and that was slightly disappointing. And for me, Apollo 13 will always be the benchmark for this sort of space exploration movie, and it was no Apollo 13, sadly. What about yourself?
I know this will sound like a humble brag, but I got to actually, during our absence from podcasting together, I actually got to chat with Fred Hayes from Apollo 13 at a Star Trek convention. So, yeah, that was an experience. You often find at these Star Trek conventions, they invite, not just the imaginary space adventurers, but real life astronauts as well. So Fred Hayes was there from Apollo 13, and I got to ask him a question at the press conference, which was kind of, you look at kids these days and what they're talking about, what they want to grow up and be. And when I was younger, it was always about astronauts. I remember coming out of Apollo 13 at the cinema, and saying to my dad, I definitely want to be an astronaut. And I asked him, do kids still want to be an astronaut? Do kids look up to the stars and dream about being that? And he went, well, I go to a lot of schools, give a lot of talks to young people, and they still dream, they still want to go up in space. So yeah, it was really exciting to get to spend some time in an absolute legend's presence. It was quite a surreal experience. He was only meant to talk for a couple minutes to the press at this press conference, but he kept talking, and he was one of the most articulate geniuses I'd probably ever been around. So that was a real pleasure. But on the First Man front, I'm really with you on this one, and I'm really gutted about it, to be honest. I was really excited for this because, again, I'm the same as you. I love Damien Chazelle, I love La La Land, Whiplash. What I do love about First Man is I think it can kind of continues that sort of trilogy of ideas about what does it take to be a great man and achieve your dreams, whether that's playing the perfect drum, mix. Is it to, open your own bar and that, what sacrifice do you have to make along the way? And I love the idea that you have this Neil Armstrong story as opposed to the story of Apollo 11, really, about how determined was this man that he was made the captain because he didn't have the ego. It's like that press conference, like, so, you know, are you guys going to make it back? Yes, the mission will be a success. That absolute will to succeed was so impressive. And I loved sort of the scene in space where he's got a bit of jewelry. That was really powerful. But I just think overall it just didn't kind of click as a film. It left me feeling it flat. I think it's a great character study of Neil Armstrong, but does that necessarily translate into a brilliant movie? Maybe not so much in this case, but I certainly think it's a really interesting piece nonetheless, but not as great as I was kind of hoping for, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I know. It feels like a letdown given you know, the work that the two of them have done before. It just something just didn't click, and yeah, it sort of aimed for the moon, but sort of didn't quite make it for me, which is a shame. But I mean, I don't know if it was just the story. I mean, you know, this kind of thing, it lends itself to the big screen. It lends itself, and I like the, you know, there was a lot to praise about the film. You're right, you know, some of the filmmaking, you know, how it puts you in the cockpit and stuff like that. When it opens, you know, the opening scene is basically you're right there with Neil in this plane as he's sort of getting shot off just into the sort of outer atmosphere and then coming back down. So, you know, you are with these guys all the way to getting to the moon, but you don't have the same kind of reaction as they do, which is a shame that, you know, that couldn't translate into the cinematic experience.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear. And one thing, before we sort of dive into your experience at the Comic Con, I want to give a big shout out to a movie that is probably just sort of potentially like 100 miles away from anyone listening to this, and that's Possum by Matthew Holness, who you might be familiar with from Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. It showed at Edinburgh Film Festival and I unfortunately missed it, so I got the chance to see it again. And if you get a chance to see Possum, I highly recommend anyone to go seek this out. It stars Sean Harris, probably notable for his appearances in the last two Mission Impossible movies. He is a disgraced child's puppeteer that kind of goes back to his childhood home, and he confronts his wicked stepfathers and a bit of a spider puppet that's hidden in a bag. Again, one of these films, the less you know, kind of the better, and I think that's a bit of a recurring trend these days. But yeah, Possum is you know, you may have the expectations of Matthew Holness from comedy horror like Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, but this is another what the fuck dark movie, and I highly recommend people seek that out if and when they can.
Yeah, it's one that I think we both missed at the Edinburgh Film Festival. It was one which I'd tried to see a couple of times, but things always came up and meant that I couldn't see it. But it was definitely on my list, and I definitely do want to catch that as he sort of frantically scrolls through his Belmont brochure to try and figure out if it is actually going to be screening in Aberdeen or not. But if not, I'll just have to wait till DVD or Blu-ray. But yeah, no, I've heard good things about that one, and I mean, yeah, a W.T.F film, a dark, creepy film starring Sean Harris. Of course, you know, there's a man who is never going to play the romantic lead in a rom-com, and you know, he knows his niche, and he's happy to play it and lean into that, and good for him.
Absolutely. So tell me about your experiences at kind of the MCM Comic Con. It looked like you had an absolute kind of tear up down there.
It was a lot of fun. It was, again, very long days. Oh, my heart bleeds for myself. You know, oh gosh, terrible me having to get up at 6, head along, queue up, get in, and then. But you know, there was a lot of to enjoy and a lot to discuss as well. I can the easiest thing to do is probably break it down day by day, and one of the first things I did was the Horror Through the Generations panel, which was sitting on. There was several horror legends there, so there was a sort of group discussion being chaired, and there was Tony Todd, who Candyman, Kane Hodder, who played Jason in Friday the 13th Part 2, along with Catherine Isabel from Ginger Snaps, Ray Santiago from Ash and the Evil Dead, and Linnea Quigley from Return of the Living Dead. And they were sort of talking very sort of general sort of discussion about the current state of horror. You know, Tony Todd had a lot to say actually in praise of places like Netflix and streaming sites that, you know, were giving more opportunities to young sort of new filmmakers. There was a lot of praise as well for Blumhouse in what they're doing at the moment. And I mean, they're just going to another level now with the Halloween, not remake, Halloween direct sequel that misses out other sequels. But that's a whole other conversation, which you can actually hear on Nerd Nuptial. Tristan and the girl went, and I've got a great episode on that one, which I highly recommend that you listen to. And they were also talking about their favorite films, and I think one of my favorite questions was someone asked, what's the main difference between a low budget horror film and a big budget horror film. And Kane Hodder said they take the makeup off for lunch. That got a lot of laughs around the audience at the fact that if he was on a low budget film, it just, oh no, just keep it on, we'll work around it, I'll just eat through a straw or something like that, it'll be fine. And then they were sort of talking about their favorite horror films the last few years, and there was the sort of Get Out, Hereditaries and stuff like that were mentioned. So it's nice to see that even though they work in the industry, they still have a lot of time to watch the films and stuff like that. And there was a lot of time spent walking the floor, seeing some great cosplays. There was lots of Deadpools, as always. Lots of Spider-Man Homecomings with the yellow blazer on and a backpack, which meant, of course, you've got all your stuff with you, which is fine. But there was quite a lot of Hugh Jackman from The Greatest Showmans, and the rivalry between Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman just goes to another level when you get to somewhere like this. And after the horror panel, there was a sing-along with The Greatest Showman, and I basically didn't have time. There wasn't anything that I wanted to watch at that time, so I sat in and watched it. And yeah, I mean, this film is a genuine phenomenon since it came out last year. Everyone knew every single word. They were getting up, they were dancing, they were singing. Everyone who was Hugh Jackman got up on the stage at the end, and they were working the crowd and stuff like this. It's amazing how this film, which most people wrote off when it first came out, this was the film that lost out to the Disaster Artist and stuff at the Golden Globes. It didn't even win Best Song at the Oscars, even though it probably should have. But this film has become the Mamma Mia of its time, and good on Hugh Jackman for creating this film, which is this is these Comic Cons are basically a celebration of fandom. It can be about comics, it could be about movies, it could be about TV shows, science fiction, all these sort of things. But when people find something that they genuinely love, it's great to see. And it was impossible not to get swept up in all that. The Saturday was a bit of a mismatch and trying to get to different panels, but trying to line things up so you can see. I was wanting to see a Tony Todd panel where he was getting interviewed by Kim Newman, but it was starting late, so I had to skip that to then go and queue up to catch a preview of Overlord. And this was in one of those cinema trucks, so a cinema van, which actually was quite nice and quite plush inside. Actually, I was expecting it to be a lot worse inside, but so there was about 90 of us packed in quite a very small space to watch Overlord. So it's the new film from Bad Robot, and there's lots of rumors going around. Any film that's being produced by J.J. Abrams at the moment is basically said, well, is it a Cloverfield sequel? Is it a Cloverfield prequel? I'm not going to spoil that just now. You can find out for yourselves. But it was actually a lot of fun. It was good old-fashioned. It's 18 rated. It's World War II. It's about a group of American soldiers who get dropped into France, who have to take down a satellite dish on a German compound in a French town. But they discover something else going on in the basement of this compound, where the Germans are basically experimenting and trying to create, as one of the lead Nazis says, 1,000-year war needs 1,000-year soldiers. And it basically turns into a major sort of schlocky B movie, but I think it's a lot of fun. It helps when you've got a guy who plays the villain and sort of leans into the sort of campiness of it. And it's Pilou Asbæk. I think he's in Game of Thrones, and basically he seems to be the European version of Michael Shannon. If you had these two guys together, they could basically play brothers. They look almost identical. And then there's also one of the lead soldiers in the American side is played by Wyatt Russell, who just continues to evolve into his dad. There's several bits. He's got a very tightly sort of shorn beard. If that beard grew out just a little bit, he would basically become McCready from The Thing. And I think he's going to have a really great career ahead of him. He's been fantastic in Black Mirror. He had a great bit part in Ingrid Goes West and stuff like that. he can play a slacker, but he can also sort of do the sort of hardcore action roles as well. So I think he's a chip off the old block and is going to be a big star. I think if he gets the right sort of A-list role at some point.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I'm going to go see it at the weekend, and I've been really sold on the trailers, which seem like a whole bunch of fun. So yeah, count me in as looking forward to it.
So yeah, no, it's a recommend. Yeah, it's out this week. Well, by the time this is released, it'll be out this weekend. So yeah, it's it does what it says on the tin. Don't go expecting Saving Private Ryan or something like this. This is U.S. soldiers versus basically zombie Nazis. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, but don't take it too seriously. And if you like your gore, I think you'll be more than entertained. If you don't like gore, it's probably not the film for you. Yeah. So after that, I was going to try and go back to a couple of panels, but unfortunately couldn't get into the main stage area because of something called Critical Role. Now, Critical Role is something which I was not aware of until I went to MCM Comic Con. But essentially, this is a web series where a group of voice actors who do the voices for cartoons and sort of video games and stuff like that meet once a week to play Dungeons and Dragons, and they broadcast it live. They create their own characters and stuff like that. And this thing, from what I witnessed, is absolutely huge. It is crazy how people were going absolutely insane for this, to the point where basically the 2 o'clock panel was full at 11 o'clock. This was one of those cons where you go in at the start of the day and they won't clear between each panel, so you could basically sit in for the whole day if you wanted and watch panel after panel after panel. And this is what people were doing, up to the point which basically meant I couldn't watch the Slaughterhouse Rules panel, and I also missed a couple of other panels after that because it was just so busy. It was just insane. But I'll get onto that in a minute because I did actually manage to see some of it the next day. So with that done, I basically decided to queue up and get Paul Bettany's autograph. And I was lucky enough to be able to spend a couple of minutes chatting to him. And so I was able to ask him the question that we needed answered, that we proposed a couple of episodes ago. When are we going to get a sequel to Master and Commander? I said, the people need to know, Paul. I basically said, I know you're not going to be able to talk about it. I know you're going to be sworn to secrecy. I know you're going to hate talking about it. But when do we get that sequel to Master and Commander? And he laughed. And he said that he would love to do it. He loved that film. He would love to do it. But unfortunately, he doesn't think it's ever going to happen because it would cost too much money to make. And that's the sad fact of business in Hollywood, I guess, these days. He said it did make money. It got Oscar nominations and stuff. It just didn't make enough money to be able to warrant putting what I presume. This film was out in 2003, so you're now probably looking at you would need at least a budget of 150 to 200 million to be able to make a film like that. But I told him that people they've done films 20 odd years down the line where you can have an older Jack and an older Stephen. I think an older Paul Bettany and an older Russell Crowe would be a great combination on screen. The Master and Commander, I think there was about 13 books written, so the story's out there. So who knows? Maybe we'll just have to privately finance it. We could do a Kickstarter on the podcast and get enough money to be able to get them back on the ship.
Well, Russell Crowe's already endorsed our message anyway,
exactly,
so that's something.
Exactly. He wants one, so all we need is Paul to retweet it as well, and then we might be able to get something moving.
Absolutely.
So yeah, Hollywood, listen, we need a sequel to Master and Commander. Don't go rebooting the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, as I have heard recently they might be doing. Master and Commander, that's where it's at.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that one. The Filibuster podcast is the number one champion of Master and Commander 2.
Absolutely. So my third and final day at the MCM Comic Con started with visiting the Funko stand. Now this was something that had been absolutely queued around the block for, and I've never really understood the appeal of Funkos. I'm not sure, but are you a fan of Funkos?
No, I don't get them either. When I see rooms of people with it all in boxes, like I've got one or two that I've got as presents over the years, but I don't understand it. It's over my head.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, this was something that became very apparent while I was at here, that they could probably take MCM Comic Con, take out comic and put in Funko, because there was an area for the Comics Village with all the artists and stuff like that, but the majority of stands were selling Funkos. You had the massive Funko stand that people queued up to get their exclusives, and I've talked, many times about first world problems. I had to stifle laughter when seeing the first world problems of grown men complaining to this poor volunteer about how they had run out of an exclusive Ghost Rider Doctor Strange Funko Pop. And this was on the Sunday, first thing on the Sunday, because they basically sold out on the Friday and the Saturday. It's like, why you should have had some available for the Sunday? This isn't fair. This was the only day I could come in, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, geez, calm down. It's only a toy. If you wanted an exclusive toy, you should have gone to the Hasbro stand, because I got a Star Wars one from there, and there was no queue. Basically, that kind of thing 10 years ago, that's where people would have been queuing out the block for exclusive Transformers toys, exclusive Marvel action figures. But no, everybody wants Funkos these days. But, there's an all-right documentary on Netflix. It's basically filmed by Funko, so it's very pro-Funko, obviously. It doesn't go into the murkier side of things. Basically, the people who go to these exclusive stands first thing in the morning, buy them, then go back to their stand and jack up the price. I'm sure there's this whole world of second-hand dealing of Funkos that is out there. But if you want to try and understand the appeal, there's a documentary. I think it's called Making Fun. It's on Netflix just now. If you want to understand the appeal, it's still slightly over my head, but I wanted to experience the rush of going to these things and sort of queuing up. And I did buy one so I didn't leave empty-handed, because otherwise I thought it'd be a bit weird. But I basically got one, so that was fine. But elsewhere, there was big presences on the day. They had Doctor Who, huge Doctor Who stand, loads of Jodie Whittaker merchandise. They're really pushing. It was great to see how many girls were getting involved in sort of getting the coats, the backpacks, all this sort of things. But they also were trialing a new escape room, a licensed Doctor Who escape room. So I went in on my own because I was on my own, so I got to play it by myself. And in some ways, if people aren't aware of what escape rooms are, basically you get locked in a room and you've got to solve various puzzles in order to be able to get out. But, there's never the threat of death. So it's like a, PG-13 version of Saw. And so I was able to do it myself, and I actually was able to concentrate on it. I think if you've got 5 people all shouting at each other trying to fix one thing, it's like the Crystal Maze as well, if anyone knows Crystal Maze. So this is going to be coming to Edinburgh, Manchester, and London, sort of around the end of the year. And from the small part that I saw, it looks like it could be a lot of fun. Especially, it helps if you know your Doctor Who stuff, but again, you don't need to be a complete Who fanatic in order to be able to do that. So there was that. They had stuff for Aquaman, Lego Movie 2, they had Glass showing and stuff like that. So they had trailers and all this sort of thing for those. But the major thing which I was able to see on the final day, after camping out for 6 hours in a screen in the main stage area, it basically became Hall H because of this Critical Role thing, which I witnessed a reaction of when they finally all came on stage. It was something like out of what you can imagine a One Direction concert would have been. It was screaming absolute bedlam. And these were people who had started the day by coming in and sort of watching a Save the Shadowhunters thing. So it was a panel with about a TV show called Shadowhunters. They'd watched the first episode of season 4 of Outlander. They probably didn't even want to watch that. Some people did, but it was a really odd situation where there was a rather graphic sex scene halfway through, and basically everyone's sort of fidgeting around because there was basically 2,000 to 3,000 people in this one room all watching it, and everyone's sort of going so there was that. And but then finally at the end of the day was the thing which I had wanted to see, and that was the first 30 minutes of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the new animated Spider-Man film, which is coming out on December the 12th. And I have to say, it looks absolutely fantastic. It's been, before, Civil War came out, people were going, do we really need another Spider-Man? And then Tom Holland came in, totally nailed the role, and everyone went, oh yeah, that's fine, yeah, we could do another version of Spider-Man. Do we really need another version of Spider-Man if we're going to get an animated version? And the answer is yes, because this is telling Miles Morales' version of Spider-Man, although it's also got Peter Parker in it and a few other surprises along the way, in the fact that basically, due to an accident, a rip in the space-time continuum opens, and a lot of different versions of Spider-Man will converge on one particular universe. And the animation is fantastic. The voice actors are great. Jake Johnson from New Girl and Jurassic World is playing a sort of more jaded version of Peter Parker. Nicolas Cage apparently is playing Spider-Man Noir, a sort of private detective sort of film noir version of Spider-Man, which I can't wait to see. But also, this is something that I noticed, and if it was true, and I did see what I saw, then this is a universe of Spider-Man that I would want to live in the fact it visits Times Square, and in Times Square there is a film poster up for From Dusk Till Dawn, which was the once mooted vampire sequel to Shaun of the Dead. So the fact that the directors are clearly big Edgar Wright fans, and so if they're Edgar Wright fans, and any of that sort of wackiness and sort of filmmaking style transfers into the animation of this film, then I think we are all in for a real treat, and we will be happy to see another version of Spider-Man come in December. But from what I saw, there's a lot of jokes. It's one of those ones where it's very aware of itself. It's very self-aware, and there's a couple of jokes particularly aimed at the Sam Raimi versions, and in particular Spider-Man 3, and there's a scene that includes some dancing, but I'll say no more than that. So jive walking down the street and stuff like that. So I have to say that it was one that I wasn't really on my radar before, but now my spider sense is tingling all over, and I can't wait to see it.
I'm really excited to see it. I got to obviously the wee preview at the end of the Venom film, and yeah, it was kind of the first real footage I'd seen of it, and it just looks kind of really good fun. So all these Easter eggs make it even sound more appealing. So yeah, I'm really curious to see it in come December.
Yeah, no, the first 30 minutes is sort of the origin story, and then I think because I've seen Venom as well, and that scene is basically, that's where we sort of broke off. That's where the preview ended. So basically, if you have seen Venom, you've not really seen anything yet of what the potential of this film is. And I have to say that I think we probably both agree on this one, is that the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse has a lot more potential than Venom had, which is a shame. But were we ever expecting much from Venom? I don't know.
Perhaps not. It did have 2 good post-credit scenes, so there's that.
Yeah, a wonderful Woody Harrelson in a very odd ginger wig. I mean, I did actually like certain aspects of Venom, in the fact that it was a certain aspect of Tom Hardy's performance. Really, the rest of the film is utter garbage. It's just absolutely awful. And I think I mentioned it when we reviewed Upgrade a few months ago. Basically, Upgrade is the film that Venom should have been. So if you want to see one Venom film this year with a guy who kind of looks like Tom Hardy, make it Upgrade.
Absolutely. So it sounds like we've had a manic kind of few weeks, and I'm kind of looking forward to a more settled kind of few weeks where we're catching films and having some chit chats and topics. It'll be interesting to sort of see out the end of the year now.
Yeah, no, because I was actually looking ahead, and it does look like there's less sort of films coming out now, not as many big films that I want to see. So I think I'm actually going to be catching up on Netflix more than anything, because there's a lot coming out on Netflix. House on Haunted Hill, I've heard good things of a couple of episodes through that. There's a new Orson Welles documentary and film that's out on Netflix just now. So there's a lot to be watching on Netflix. And of course, we've got a lot of films to be watching for the A24 project as well. Absolutely.
So it's going to be an exciting period of time. So if people wanted to follow your adventures, and I would add, you should put Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the new version of that, the chilling adventures of Sabrina, onto your Netflix watch list. Where can kind of people follow you on Twitter and so on, and find out obviously your books as well?
They can get me on Twitter at champcelluloid. My blog is championshipcelluloid.blogspot.com, so you can follow me there. Although if I listened to Nerd Nuptial correctly this week, they were potentially telling me not to add Sabrina not the Teenage Witch, is it? It's not Sabrina the Teenage Witch. What's the name of it again?
The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. All I will say is, Dallas, do you like the movie by A24, The Witch?
Oh, I love The Witch.
Do you like that there's a lot of goats in the A24 movie, The Witch?
I do.
Then I highly recommend that you will like The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. You can take that to the bank. That is my recommendation. So if you like that version, that movie, you will like this. And it's I really like it. It's very rare that me and my girlfriend have much in common when it comes to watching TV outside of things like The Apprentice. So I recommend it. I think you'll really enjoy this one. I think it's actually really up your street.
Have they replaced the talking cat with the talking goat?
The cat is there.
The cat is
is there. It's perhaps not as sarcastic, but the cat is there.
Ah, well, okay. I'm adding it to my list now. Then you've got me.
Excellent.
So, if people want to talk about Sabrina, the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, with you on Twitter, where could they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Lee_Nostromo. And yeah, I've still got a few episodes to go, but bizarrely enough, I spoke with the director of the 9th episode of Sabrina, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, when I was in London. He directed Lizzie. So yeah, he gave me a bit of a preview telling me that he thought very highly of the show just before it kind of came onto Netflix. So it was definitely safe to say that Craig McNeil Smith was on the ball with that recommendation. So thank you, Craig, and I hope you enjoy it when you get the chance to watch it.
I'm sure I will, and I will let you know what I think, as always.
Absolutely. So we will join you next week for another episode of Filibuster. But as I say, we've got our new podcast out, the first 3 episodes of the A24 project. So you can find that on iTunes, Google Play. We're on Spotify as well, so you can listen to us alongside things like the Spice Girls and Bon Jovi and everyone else. So that's something exciting. So yeah, we look forward to talking with you again soon. Bye.
Bye.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.